so today we're going to trim, and I have a little cup here that's ready to trim. You want to make sure that your piece is leather hard, so it should still feel cold. It should not be turning white. That means it's bone dry, and it shouldn't be sticky to touch whatsoever. And it's this area at the bottom that's most important. Before you start, feel the bottom of your piece compared to the outside bottom of your piece, and visualize how thick the space is in between your fingers here. Because you don't want to turn this into a planter. You also want to remember if you're going to see a foot ring at the outside or not. We are going to trim a little foot ring today. So the first step is to take the piece, and you can use the rings on your pottery wheel to first align the form on here. And to recenter it, we're going to use our needle tool. So you take your needle tool and you brace your arms, and you just draw a circle at the very top of your form. And what you're doing is you're comparing the negative space around this line that you just drew, and you want to compare the top and the bottom area and the right and left area. It is ever so slightly thicker on this side, so what I'm going to do is just move the piece from thicker to thin. We're going to just slide it over, erase the ring, and draw it again. Once you feel like you're totally satisfied, which I rarely am, then you can start trimming. So we're going to try that one more time. Okay. So once you're happy with that, you need a little bit of soft clay, nothing too wet or gushy. You only need about 3 little pinches here, and this is to stabilize the piece onto the wheel while you have it spinning. You want to make sure you push straight down, because you just spent all that time centering your piece, so you don't want it to go anywhere. So you push that straight down while you apply the pieces of clay to keep it from flying off of your wheel head. You have 2 trim tools in your kit. You have one large loop or trim tool, and then you have one small. It's got the rounded edge and a flat edge, and so this gives you rounded curves and straight, sharp right angles. The first one we're going to use is the small one. We're going to use this curved side. You're going to get your wheel going quite fast, and you're going to take the tool with both hands, lock your arms into your body, and you're going to make just a little tiny spot, wide and deep enough for the tip of your finger to be able to rest in there. This is going to allow you to have a lot more control of the tool as you start trimming the outside. You should have an idea of what shape you want. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a foot ring. I like to use this flat edge as my guide for the foot ring, so I'll bring it to the side and remove clay that way. So I'll take my left hand, tip of my middle finger goes here, and then I just start trimming off the clay from the outside. And you can take this pretty much as far as you want, keeping in mind the more narrow the base of your cup, the more unstable it'll be when you put it down on the table. So I've taken quite a bit off, and now I'm left with this really ugly edge here. So what I'm going to do is round that edge, and I can use any tool to do that. I personally like to use this larger tool to do any major rounding. I'm going to have this little round edge to our foot ring. Now with the foot ring, you could use this. Since I used a rounded edge, I could create a rounded ring, but I'm not going to. But I am going to use this sharp angle here to kind of dig in and straighten the ring up a little bit. Always trim everything on the outside before you come back to the inside. When you first start throwing, it might be helpful. My ring has kind of gotten a lot smaller, so it might be helpful to make a little mark so you know where to stop. So I'm going to use this tool here, my potter's knife. And you don't have to do this. This just kind of helps sometimes visually. When I'm working at the top, I like to use the point of the trim tool. So I'm going to come right where I left off, and I'm just using that point and slowly removing pieces of clay at a time. You don't need to take all of it off at once. And I'm going to definitely take it all the way down to where the dip is so that I have something flat in the end. And making sure that your arms stay stationed down to your body so your hands can be as steady as possible. And if you have a little brush, that can be helpful to kind of get all those chunks out of the way. Okay, so now I'm left with this foot ring, and it's not really completed here. It's rounded and it's ragged, so I'm going to use this tool and just rotate it the opposite way, so kind of like I did here, but now in the inside. And that's going to help me just clean up this rim here. Now, the more weight that you take off, so the more clay that you take off of your piece, the lighter your piece is going to be in the end. So I don't really need this tall of a foot ring, so I can actually take it down a little tiny bit, just the ring itself. I'm going to take off a little bit more here at the bottom. Now, because we're exposing all of these clay, all this new clay to the air, one thing we want to do is compress the whole thing afterwards. And sometimes if your piece is wet enough, you can do it with your finger. But another way is just to use the wooden part of a tool, and you can actually just run it along the base. The other thing is your potter's knife or a wooden rib. Make sure your wooden rib's clean. So it can be nice to kind of use the edge of a wooden tool and really get in there and compress everything. So this will stop things, hopefully, from cracking, and it'll keep this nice and smooth, so when you go to put it on a table, you're not going to scratch the heck out of any table. And the glaze will take to the outside just the same now that we're kind of compressing everything. Okay? Once you're happy with that, you can use a soft pencil. That's what I like to use to mark your initials in the bottom. And then instead of pulling your piece, just make sure you remove all of the clay from the sides. And now you're ready to make a handle or attach your handle.